This happened when I was 18 and had just moved to a new bigger city about a 30-minute drive from the small town I grew up in. I moved into my first apartment in what I thought was a decent neighborhood and lived there without incident for 6 months, with my boyfriend at the time. Things began sour between us, and since my boyfriend had recently lost his job, it was decided I would be the one to take over the lease and he would move out. It was sticky and unpleasant, but after some time of him dragging his feet, I was finally free of him. I had a friend from work move in to help me with rent since it was a 2-bedroom and all was well for a while. One weekend during January, I had been going out late, and I went to see a musical in a nearby town, so I got home shortly after midnight, kicked off my shoes, and settled down with a bowl in front of the living room TV to unwind. My roommate was out of town all weekend visiting my family, so I had the place to myself and didn't bother being quiet about it. I was still wearing my dress and tights, completely relaxing, when I heard a knock at my door a couple feet to my left. I glanced at the clock, which almost read 1 a.m., and I thought, who the heck is knocking at my door this late? My front door had half a window covered by blinds, but it was very obvious I was home, as the TV was only a foot or so past the door. My spider senses began to tingle, but I was young, naive, and from a small town where things are pretty safe. I never thought that what was about to happen would ever happen to me. I peeked out between the blinds without opening the door and flicked on my porch light, which illuminated a young man. He couldn't have been more than 25, slight build, honestly looking pretty harmless. Background, I'm like 5'2" and around 110 pounds, female. I'm pretty scrappy, so I looked at this dude and sized him up. I actually thought to myself, I could probably take him if I needed to. Before hollering through the door, yes, he launched into a story talking fast about how he just got into a car accident in front of my house. His young daughter was hurt and his phone had been slung in the wreck. It was lost, and could he please use my phone to call an ambulance? My heart was immediately in my throat. A hurt child? This man needed my help, but something felt wrong. I told him I'd call 911 for him, and he said, that would be fine, but could he please use my phone to call the child's mother to explain they were going to the ER? This seemed reasonable to me in my young naive brain, but I was still wary. Against my better judgment, trust me, after this, someone could be on fire on my front doorstep and I wouldn't open the door for them after this lesson learned. I cracked the door open and quickly slipped the phone out to him, locking the padlock the moment my hand was clear. I still felt something was wrong, so as he made a call, which I could not hear, I paced my living room floor and grabbed a kitchen knife, holding it down to my side, waiting. Everything in my body was screaming at me that something was wrong, but I couldn't turn away from a hurt child. I just couldn't. I wanted to help. A few moments passed and I seemed to calm a bit, briefly sitting down to wait. I put the kitchen knife down next to me on the sofa. When I heard a knock signaling me that the dude was gone, I got up without thinking and walked to the door, leaving the knife behind. I cracked the door only an inch, just as before, and he went to slip the phone back to me. It was at this moment everything changed. Suddenly, a much larger man stepped from the shadow to the left of my door. I briefly registered he was wearing a ski mask and my heart jumped to my throat in an instant. He kicked the heavy metal door before I even had a second to react, which, being still ajar, flew into me, knocking me backwards into the ground. Another man came from the other side of the door, all of them rushing forward in my apartment. I'm not sure if there were 3 or 4 total, but suddenly 3 large masked men were looming over me as I lay stunned on my apartment floor. They stood between me and the exit and began to circle me, causing rings. My mind registered that they were screaming at me, various things along the lines of, "Give me all your money." The largest of them reached into his brown Carhartt coat and withdrew a gun, which he pointed at me as I lay at their feet, still stunned by the force of the door hitting me and knocking me to the ground. Fight or flight kicked in and my brain screamed at me. Fight for your life. Now, before I get an earful, let me say you really don't know how you'll react in a situation until you've been the one staring down the barrel of a gun. Instinct made me do this, and I know it wasn't the smartest thing per se, but this is just what happened. Can't change it now. I recall the men bouncing up and down while they screamed at me. In retrospect, it seems almost comical how they jumped around me. In the heat of the moment, I looked up and decided they'd shoot me if they wanted to, but I was not going down without a fight, and I was not about to let them drag me down the hallway to a bedroom and do know who's what with me either. I looked up at the gun inches from my face and I got angry. I reached out my hand and smacked it away. Luckily I didn't die, then immediately reached out and grabbed the coat of the nearest guy, using it to haul myself to my feet. I was almost up, and I even managed to throw a punch, which moved the ski mask of the one I swung at, barely landing, but affording me a glimpse of his face when one reached out and knocked me back down. Hard, but I wouldn't be stopped. I barely felt the blow, which left me bruised later. Hands flying, I struck out in every way imaginable. I kicked out at them from the self-defense position I'd been taught in the safety class. I was a whirlwind of hair, nails, and fists. Looking up at them, I briefly registered that from the looks on their faces, this robbery and this girl were not going or reacting as anticipated. They were flustered by my apparent lack of fear. They hadn't expected me to not give one flying shit about the gun in my face. I literally smacked it away when they pointed at me. Again, I'm extremely lucky it didn't go off. I know this. My mind became focused enough to register. I need help. I was alone in my apartment, but hopefully they didn't know that. I began to scream at the very top of my lungs. Michael! Over and over I yelled his name at the top of my lungs. Michael was my neighbor, ex-military, a mountain of a man who I knew owned guns and shared a living room wall with my flat. They must have thought I wasn't alone because they panicked and fled out the front door, taking my cell phone and purse as they went, fleeing into the dark night. I ran after them, barefoot in the snow, screaming, "Help! Help!" to no one but the night sky, adrenaline pumping through my veins like fire. Michael emerged at my side carrying a shotgun, dressed only in boots and boxers. I pointed to the tracks in the snow and bless him. He pursued them, coming back a moment later empty-handed. My phone was gone and I tried to call my parents from his, but nobody answered. Michael let me spend the rest of the night on his couch, since I was becoming quickly hysterical now that my adrenaline was ebbing. I called the police. They came and I made a report. News vultures quickly appeared outside my building, and I ended up being the top story on the news the next morning. Although I declined to be on TV, I just wanted to be done. Looking back, I was very lucky. I could have been shot, killed, raped, or whatever they wanted to do with me. Luckily, my insane response startled the shit out of them, and they ran. I'm more street smart now. Carry a taser and pepper spray everywhere I go, and never allow my sympathy for another person to endanger my own life. It sucks I have to think that way, but I'd rather live as a jerk than die a good Samaritan. I moved out shortly after, breaking my lease and citing concerns for personal safety. Had the police report to prove it, and thankfully my landlord understood and let me go. I found a new place and take great care to listen to my instincts when they speak up.
This was around 2001, maybe 2002. I was 17. My best friend Danny lived in one of those apartment complexes where half the units had broken locks on the main gate, and the other half just didn't bother using it. Not dangerous exactly, but not the kind of place you wandered around at night without paying attention. Danny lived there long enough she'd stopped paying attention. She called me from the payphone downstairs. She didn't have a landline, which sounds insane now, but back then it was just Tuesday, and told me she'd seen a man outside acting strange, hiding behind things, watching her. Short guy, heavy set, head freshly shaved. Drunk enough that he was swaying, but not so drunk he'd given up on whatever he was doing. She yelled at him, told him she could see him. He stepped out, acting like he wasn't doing anything weird. Reached toward her dog Biscuit like he was trying to test whether the dog was friendly, and eventually wandered off between the buildings. Danny didn't think much of it after that. She was like that. Something could scare her, and she'd shake it off in 10 minutes and be annoyed at herself for reacting. She went back upstairs. Her front door was open. She told me about it later in pieces, the way you tell a story when you're still figuring out what it means. She said she stood there in the doorway for a second just staring at it. The door had a latch that didn't catch right. You had to hold the handle and wait a beat before letting go, or it swung back open. She always did it without thinking. It was just muscle memory at that point. Whoever had opened the door hadn't known about the latch. She went in anyway. I don't know why. I probably would have too. Biscuit didn't meet her at the door. That was the first thing that got her. Biscuit was a medium-sized mutt, brown and white, built like a loaf of bread on stilts, and was incapable of not reacting when someone came home. You could hear him skidding on the hardwood from the hallway outside, but that night he was just running around in circles. Tight, frantic circles around the living room, and then he went into the kitchen and crawled under the table and wouldn't come out. Danny left, went back downstairs, and waited for my boyfriend Marcus and me to show up. We didn't believe her. I feel bad about it now. We laughed a little. Marcus did a quick walkthrough, flipped on a few lights, checked the closets, came back out shrugging. Biscuit had calmed down a bit by then, or at least he stopped the circles. We figured she'd spooked herself. Danny had a gift for that. She could turn a creaky staircase into a whole situation. So we went to Marcus's place across the lot to hang out, and that's when we realized nobody had any rolling papers. Danny said she had some in her bathroom. She wouldn't go get them. I'm talking flat out refused. Arms crossed, jaw set, not moving. She said she didn't care. She wasn't going back in there. We teased her for another few minutes, and then I said fine, I'd go, because I wanted the night to start, and we were wasting time. I walked across the parking lot alone. I pushed the door open and called for Biscuit out of habit. He didn't come. I looked over and he was back under the kitchen table, same position, trembling. And the thing that made my stomach shift, he was staring down the hallway. Not at me, past me, fixed on something I couldn't see from where I was standing. I left the front door open behind me. I don't know if I decided to do that or if it just happened. I turned on the lights as I went. Bathroom, Danny's sister's room, the hallway light, normal check. Nothing felt wrong exactly, just off. Then I got to the master bedroom. I pushed the door open and reached around for the switch. The light came on, and I saw him. He was under the bed, just there, on his side, face toward me, hands folded under his cheek like he was settled in for the night. His head was shaved, same as Danny had described. For a second, and I mean a real second, not a long one, I thought it was something else, a bag, a bundle of something. My brain tried to make it into anything other than what it was. Then his face resolved, and I understood what I was looking at. I stepped back. I didn't run. I just stepped back, one step, and pulled the door most of the way shut. Not all the way because I didn't want the click to wake him. And then I walked backward down the hallway, slow, watching the door the whole time. Every floorboard I hit sounded like a gunshot to me. I made it to the front door, stepped outside, stood there. Nothing happened. No sound, no footsteps, no door swinging open. I started thinking maybe it was laundry. Maybe I scared myself. Danny had been wound up about it all night, and I'd let it get into my head. I didn't want to go back across the lot and tell everyone there was a man under her bed, and then have Marcus go in and pull out a duffel bag. So I went back in. I picked up the kitchen knife on the way, not from planning, just from instinct. I went down the hallway again, slower this time, stopped outside the door, listened, looked at the gap underneath for shadows, for movement. Nothing. I opened it. He was still there, same position, still asleep, or unconscious, or something close to it. I cannot explain what it felt like to stand in that doorway and look at him. There was something about the stillness of it, the way he just arranged himself, like he belonged there, like he'd been there before and knew exactly where to go. I left. I ran. Marcus called the police and they got there within 10 minutes. 2 officers went in and came back out with them. The guy half conscious and grinning like it was all a misunderstanding. He tried to greet me like we knew each other. Casual, unbothered. He told them he thought it was his apartment. Wrong door, wrong unit. The whole thing. Just a drunk guy who made a mistake. They took him in for the night, no charges. The door hadn't been forced and nothing had been taken. I've thought about that explanation a lot over the years. And I don't know. Maybe. People do stupid things when they're drunk. I've seen it. But here's what I can't get past. If you stumbled into the wrong apartment by accident, if you were drunk and confused and just wanted to sleep, why would you go into the bedroom? Why would you get under the bed? Why not the couch? I've never come up with a good answer for that. Maybe there is one. Maybe I'm reading into it because of how frightened I was. And fear makes everything feel more deliberate than it was. But Danny would have been home alone that night. She would have gone to bed. And he would have been there, in the dark, underneath her, waiting, or sleeping, or somewhere in between. I don't know which one's worse.
It happened back in 2023. I was 18 years old at the time, living away from home for my studies in a small town. The place I rented was at the far corner of a small colony. It was a wide area surrounded by walls as a boundary, and the houses were arranged with 4 in each direction, forming a square. The middle area was open and empty, which we used for air drying clothes or sitting around with friends in the evenings who also rented rooms there. About the house, each one had 3 rooms and long porches connecting them. Behind our boundary, there were train tracks, so every time a train went by, it was very noisy, and our house used to shake a little. About my story, it happened at night. As usual, after eating dinner, I went to bed. Not wanting to study and feeling lazy, I used my phone for a while, and then went to sleep. At some point, I started to wake up around 1 a.m., and I felt like my friend was sleeping beside me. Then I opened my eyes and looked at her, but she wasn't there. Fully awake now, I looked around for my friend, but I didn't see her anywhere. Then, I don't know why or what I was thinking, I checked under my bed to see if she was there, but she wasn't. I looked around my room. You see, my room wasn't big, it was small, with only my bed, a table, and a wooden Elmira without doors, so I would have seen her if she was there, but she wasn't. Then I thought maybe she went outside to sit with others, because I could hear some of our friends still outside on the porch due to the summer heat. Then I checked my windows and door, but everything was locked from the inside. I started to become really confused, thinking, how did she leave the room without opening the door? How was that possible? Then, dumbfounded, I sat back on my bed and started to think from the time I went to sleep to when I woke up. Then it hit me. There was no one there to begin with. I had gone to bed alone. It was my room. I didn't have a roommate. I felt so dumb. How could I get so confused? But the feeling of someone sleeping beside me was so real. I swear, I felt like we were sharing the same pillow, their head right beside mine. But then I brushed it off, thinking it was because in the past few nights, my sister had visited me and stayed over. After overthinking it for a while, I fell asleep. The next day, I went to my friends, saying good morning to everyone and asking how late they stayed outside. Then I shared my weird experience from the night before, joking that my brain had played a game on me. Then two of them looked at me and one said,
I don't think it's just your brain playing tricks on you. I had the same experience a few nights ago. There was someone sleeping beside me.
She shared that it wasn't her roommate because her roommate was back home at the time. But unlike me, she actually saw someone lying right beside her. She was terrified and didn't want to look at them directly, so she closed her eyes and pulled the covers over herself. I felt scared, and after that experience, I started keeping my Holy Bible beside me and prayed before going to sleep to feel safe and protected. I was so glad it was my first and last experience of something so weird. I hope it never returns again, but sometimes I still wonder what it was. Was it just my brain confusing me, or something entirely paranormal? This is a true story, not about me, but about my two sisters. At the time, they were living together in a rented apartment. The building was actually quite nice, clean, peaceful, and in a quiet part of the city. Everything seemed normal. One sister was job hunting, the other was supposed to be in college that day, but a fever kept her home, and that's when the woman upstairs knocked. It was early afternoon when they heard a soft knock at the door. My elder sister answered it and felt uneasy the moment she saw the woman standing outside. The woman was old, thin, with hollow cheeks. Her eyes were unreadable, and she stood unnaturally still.
My daughter's in the hospital,
She said slowly.
My phone isn't working. May I use yours to call her?
She held out a battered old mobile phone, something from another decade. It was clearly dead. Despite her instinct to shut the door, my elder sister hesitated. My younger sister, not sensing the same discomfort, invited the woman in. She sat down quietly, took the phone they handed her, and made a call. Someone answered. A woman's voice crackled through the speaker, soft and weak.
Hello?
The old woman began speaking calmly.
It's me. Are you okay? Are they taking care of you?
There were replies, faint and slow, but real. A woman's voice, low and distant, but undeniably there. After a few minutes, the old woman ended the call and handed back the phone. Then she looked at them, smiling faintly.
You should come up to my flat.
She said,
There's no one there. My daughter's in the hospital and my husband and son are both at work. I'll make you something nice to eat.
And with that, she turned and started climbing the stairs. Both sisters followed. They didn't know why. Maybe it was politeness, maybe pity, maybe something else entirely. But they found themselves walking up behind her. Then, when they were halfway up the stairs, the older sister suddenly grabbed the younger one's hand. "No," she whispered. "We're not going." They stopped. The spell broke. The old woman, now at the top, said nothing. She entered her flat and quietly closed the door. And as soon as she entered, they heard voices, several men speaking, laughter, movement. But she had said she was alone. The next morning, when the maid came, they asked about the woman upstairs. The maid looked uneasy. "She has no children," she said. "Her husband died 10 years ago. She lives completely alone." There was a pause. "She's known for strange things. People say she does black magic. Stay away from her." That night, a storm rolled in. Wind slammed against the windows. Lightning lit up the sky. Around 2 a.m., one of the windows burst open. My elder sister got out of bed to close it and happened to glance up toward the apartment above. And there she was. The old woman was standing in her window, watching. In the middle of the storm, at exactly 2 a.m. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just stood there, eyes locked on them as the lightning flashed behind her. The curtain was drawn instantly. She never returned, but something stayed. A feeling, a presence, a quiet weight that settled into the apartment, as if she never truly left, as if she was still watching.